Hello. And surprise, we didn't tell you that we're going to be doing this, but I am going to be running throughout season 3 a book club featuring Soul Rising, Guidance for Navigating Your Spiritual Awakening, a book that I was a co-author of. It was released in May of 2025, and we had one of the co-authors, Vanessa Grace, on the podcast late in season 2. And I thought I was going to start reading this book the second that it came out. I have the hard copy, or hard cover. I have a paperback on my shelf. I have the ebook on my Kindle. And in 2026, the audiobook is going to be coming out at some point. I'll let you know when that crops up. But I thought I was going to read it right away. And I was going to reach out to all the authors and do a bunch of networking. And little did I know, and soon found out, June was the craziest month because I relaunched my business. I was juggling new job and internship, too many things. So I spent pretty much the rest of 2025 trying to pare down, streamline, get things together, change my relationship with technology, make some additional improvements to lifestyle, and I'm still building on that. But I read a lot in 2025. I exceeded my reading goal and ended up reading, I think, 51 books. And my goal was like 36. So I'm going to be continuing reading in 2026, of course. And I had channeled with my guides to start reading Soul Rising in December of 2025. So it came through just sit and read for an hour. So in that 1 hour, I got through the first 4 chapters of the book, conveniently, in perfect time. And I took notes on all of them. So I'm going to be going through my notes and reflections. So I'll just show you quickly if I can flip to them quick. So I have like all these like notes. This is like other journaling things, but like notes that I took while reading these books, because what reading these chapters, I should say, because what would happen is I would sit there and I would really resonate with what these authors were talking about, or I would get shot into like memories and having flashbacks. And so it kind of worked out perfectly to be able to just pause like mid thought, mid sentence, and just get some of that out and just observing what was coming up for me. So I thought it would be particularly interesting given that this podcast was created on the premise that Christine and I were in earlier stages of our spiritual awakening, a few years in, and now we're, 5 years in, which is kind of crazy. So, kind of a nice milestone and checkpoint to read a bunch of other people's spiritual awakening stories. And I thought that it would, one, be informative, two, be a cute little activity, something different, three, be a way to experiment with video, and four, fit perfectly with our lore theme, because what is lore if not origin stories? And that is what this book is full of. So I am in chapter 20 for everyone's reference. So we're not going to get to my chapter for a little bit because we're only talking about 1 through 4 today. This chapter was written by our fearless leader, aka Natalie Walstein, who had reached out to me and many other authors to gather interest in actually writing chapters for this book. And I had first started following Natalie when she did her Cosmic Calling podcast because I was interested in astrology, and this was talking about career astrology. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I started following and listening to that. And then eventually she announced that she was going to be changing what she was working on and what she was going to be putting out and pivoting into publishing. And then little did I know, many months later, I got an email saying, hey, would you be interested in writing a chapter? And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. It's like celebrities talking to me. It's like the trippiest thing that like somebody that you've been listening to for a while, then all of a sudden randomly contacts you. And I had never like commented anything or emailed her. So that was really cool. What really struck me about this chapter is the whole time I was reading it, of course, I know she's into astrology, but I was reading it and I was like, this lady's got to be a Pisces. It was really funny. And then she revealed it and I felt really vindicated. But it's really fascinating because I don't often walk around and by don't often, I never walk around and try to place signs on people. We did talk about this in one of our listener episodes, like who's like our least favorite sign or whatever. And Christine and I were essentially debunking that because I don't really think it's that helpful or useful to be oversimplifying and categorizing people. But it is funny to me knowing that astrology is a language of symbols to see them playing out in people's lives. And so that's the part for me that is appealing sometimes to go, I wonder if they have a lot of water or earth in their chart or something to that effect. And those are normally the questions that I'm going to be asking or thinking about. So again, I'm not going to give away everything about everybody's stories, but I'm just going to at least share my thoughts while reading Natalie's chapter. One, I was saying, wow, I had my jaw dropping at some points. I thought it was a really strong opener and awakening story for this book. There was illness, there was travel, there was shamans, there was premonition dreams, Saturn cycles, and divine timing. So really, really a great mix. I was reminded of the fact that it is so important to be sharing our stories, whether they're our awakening stories or just our experiences in general. And I know it's something that we try to do on this podcast, and I've been trying to do more through my business and on social media, more types of storytelling, but just sharing more of my actual lived experience. And I think we're in a position in society where we tend to be in the role of the consumer more, and we forget that we could be connecting with other people, even with something so simple as, okay, I did this journaling practice today, and this is what came through for me. You don't know, maybe that is really going to land with or inspire someone. And so we could use these tools in a way that allows us to connect with each other more. And I know we've said that is a goal for this podcast, but I think when we're in gaps between seasons and we're not working on it, as we have been at the time of me recording this, we fall back into our normal patterns and we tend to forget to do that. Tea break. This one, she was talking a lot about actually kind of what I just went on a tangent on. How convenient. She was discussing a bit about relationships, or relationships being misaligned, which I did mention a bit in my chapter too. Round 2 of my spiritual awakening was definitely linked to a misaligned relationship, which I mentioned during season 1 of this podcast because we were like 6 months out from that relationship ending when Christine and I first started recording Synergy to Synastry. And the whole time that I was reading Kerry's chapter, not the whole time, a bunch of the time, my mind just kept drifting into these reflections on that relationship and just relationship patterns and what I've gone through. And really how important it is to be able to share your gifts and talk about them, because part of it is being yourself. Because if I was to enter into a relationship right now and I couldn't talk about literally what I am doing with so much of my time, recording week ahead psychic readings for my YouTube channel. I'm teaching classes on Insight Timer where I'm talking about astrology or mentoring people to develop their intuition, or other kinds of lectures, leading meditation and journaling classes, creating different products that I'm selling in my shop, doing this podcast where we talk about feng shui and human design and dreams. And I would not be able to talk about literally what is the bulk of my life with any of these lived experiences, let alone, okay, what's my journaling practice each night? Or what do I do the first thing when I wake up every morning? It's so important to be able to share that and to connect with people. And if I couldn't talk about any of that, or didn't feel comfortable to have a partner just seeing me do any of that, then that's a problem and it's not going to work. Other piece that I related to as well, total pivot, is the connection to the body. And that's something that, as a Virgo moon, and in general, someone with a lot of earth energy in their chart, I've been recognizing a lot because I can come across to people. I've had this come up in the last year that people think I'm an air sign because, I can be very chatty, the active hands, yada, yada. I am not, and I don't have any air in my tropical chart at all, except for my IC. I just have a lot of very active mental energy, and some of that's that Virgo stuff going on. And really, what you need to heal, support, and center that is connecting back to your body. And when we're in a society, as I mentioned before, that is stimulating and overstimulating us, and I am someone who is wired Manigen, Virgo, very strong placement, Mercury in Pisces. I have all of these qualities that lend me to wanting to learn more, understand more, consume more, connect more. And so it's more, 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 more. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's juggle 40 things. And so then I can get myself stuck into doing too much and then burning myself out, or just like feeling fried or getting frustrated that I'm not getting more things done. So it's a whole productivity thing plus the perfectionism as well. One of the main tools that has kept coming up as I have been researching for myself is this idea of grounding into your body. So getting back to Kerry, that's what she was talking about a lot, because she was talking about Gaia in her workshop and in her actual chapter, connecting with that earth energy, connecting to your heart space, and really grounding. She said on page 19, quote, "You navigate spiritual awakenings through your relationship with trust." That was a mic drop. I loved that one. And I also just really appreciated how this entire chapter felt like a pep talk. I needed to read some of this. I needed to have the reminder, especially somebody who is bouncing around and doing a lot of different things. Jumping over to her workshop, I know that she did a guided meditation, which was really nice. I love those. That workshop, which is called Your Heart is the Key in Your Awakening. I appreciated her candor in speaking about this dynamic with the human experience. We're not in a vacuum. It's one thing to just say, oh, well, I want to connect to my body and I want to ground and I want to relax and I want to not get caught up in everything that's going on, when our culture, society, everything about how we are living and functioning in our world is not geared that way. And of course, we have natural biological tendencies and companies and corporations that are setting things up or creating things so that they become addictive because it's appealing to that natural biology. So many things going on. So it is difficult. And it's not so easy as to say, well, just unplug if you want to unplug, because then you're like, well, I can't run my business, or I can't function, or then I can't talk to my family, whatever it is. I appreciated her acknowledgement of it not being so simple, but at least we can make whatever our best attempt is to strike that balance. I have been focusing a lot more on detoxing from technology. I'm not going fully cold turkey, but I channel times for each week. I do at least a month out. Blocks of time where I'm not using any technology, or I'm using very limited technology, such as if I use my phone, it's just to listen to an audiobook. And I can only listen to the audiobook while crafting or something, not walking around and doing dishes, and because then it's getting into that multitasking, like overstimulation piece. So like very, very intentionally in a limited setting, outside from the biology, outside from what corporations are trying to get us to do, attention, economy, etc. Is there something going on? Am I reaching for my phone? Am I getting into that stress cycle or that narrative because I need to look inward, because there's something that I need to heal or I need to address? And so one of the main takeaways I felt was in this workshop was about the heart healing. For anyone that's familiar with the chakra system, season 1, we talked to our girl Lisa Caruso about this, Reiki master. Vanessa mentioned this as well, like healing the feminine energy and like feeling her heart, and how when you're doing the healing, it can feel very like uncomfortable. I am hearing this crop up a little bit more, but it's not something that I've done with too much intention. I'd be curious to know if there's other people who have done a lot of this heart healing work. I've mostly done journaling, and I think for me it's just I kind of have to do have to do brain healing, if you will, because I have to clear some of this space out, one, so I can be a channel, and two, so that I can kind of, it's almost like the cobwebs being cleared out, so then I can get back into the rest of my body, which includes my heart, and being able to relax and rest and reset. I know that that will continue to change and evolve over time, but yeah, I'm interested to see if this continues to present for me and maybe what I might shift or change in this area. Last comments that I had on Kerry's section. is that I really connected to that grounded energy, again, as somebody who is very earthy in a lot of ways. It can be frustrating to not know what's coming, what to do next. Earth people are very concrete. We want to plan, we want to know how things are going to work, how we can adjust, and we can't control. We can't control what's going to happen. So it's almost like the reverse of that. Well, we can scratch that itch by just trying to live in the present, which is inherently grounded. And also for me, as a North Node in the fifth house, I really resonated with the piece about playing because it's something that I quite literally am having to learn in this lifetime as someone who is very work, project, productivity, focus oriented, curious. I want to learn. I want to understand this. I want to understand that. Sometimes learning is part of my play, my pleasure, if you will, but tapping into creativity just for the sake of doing it, not for an outcome. Like I'm doing a lot of teasing of that work out. I actually did jot down, which I'm curious. So, Kerry, if you hear this, what are the top ways to heal our heart space? That was something that popped in as I was writing this. There's inner child work. It could be nostalgia. So that could be a way to heal your heart or heart wounds or really connecting to yourself. But for whatever reason, this very specific question came in. So maybe it'll be something that I look into more. If people want to share, have suggestions on how you have healed your heart space, I would expect this is a very ongoing process and we have different remedies in the same way that we have general self care. So if you have any thoughts or comments on that, please feel free to share. Awakening the Miracles Within from Nicole, who is a medium. And I resonated a lot with this section in part because she was specifically and very explicitly talking about your intuition and your development, and also the fact that we could feel othered by having these gifts. And if we already feel like we're othered or were bullied or felt like an outsider, felt really different than other people, especially during your upbringing, which I can relate to those experiences, certainly. But then leaning into something, even just to understand it, not even necessarily to talk about it with other people, it feels dangerous. And this is a bit of the witch wound, which I semi recently read a book about. So, kind of interesting to have read that and then now read this chapter. Christine and I also talked about a little bit of this concept when we were discussing stigmas in season one. I just think it's so common for people, especially that are intuitives, having a spiritual awakening because there's so much history, stereotypes, connotations, and especially negative ones, biases, things that we are carrying with us internally. So we're self rejecting in some way. Another thing that Nicole talked about in the chapter was how learning about the label medium and being able to actually identify and call herself something was really liberating and affirming. And I know it's something that Christine and I have talked about, and I've gone back and forth with at different points. Like, do you call yourself psychic? And I've landed on psychic intuitive in part because if I just say I'm an intuitive, then people don't necessarily know what that means. If you say psychic, they at least are in the ballpark of something, even though it can carry some misperceptions. Having to label yourself can feel kind of uncomfortable. So that's like almost like the next leg of the journey. First, it was, oh, hey, I have these abilities. And what does this mean? And what can I do with them? And what does that say about me or who I am? How does that shift how I'm moving through the world? That's like a multi part initial run. And then, kind of after that, I think is when we're getting to the point of putting the hat or the name tag on and doing more of the labeling. And then you have a whole spin with that of, do I need the label? Is it better to have the label for my sake or for other people's sake? Can I create my own label? Tangentially, I just think it's an interesting discussion and something that a lot of people on the spiritual journey, and especially those that go into business, like Christine and I, have to reckon with at some point. The first time that I heard somebody say this was Christine, probably when we were in season 1, but I've been kicking it around for a long time, that this idea that really my job, what I'm doing for my business, what we do on this podcast is translating. When you're an intuitive psychic, we're switching our brain waves to connect essentially to another frequency and plane, and we are translating images, or if it comes in a specific language or feelings or sensations or sound, etc., we are translating that to then convey to somebody else, hoping that that will land with them, or that we're saying it in the right way so that they understand what it is that's coming through, or that it makes sense to them even if it doesn't make sense to us. And then similarly on the astrological side or human design side or numerology side, symbols, numbers, shapes. What does this mean? What does that mean? What's an aspect? Everything has a definition. It's all symbology. This means this, but then in these conditions, it could mean that. And it can be very, very complicated. And that is pretty much what I am doing for all of this work all the time. I was reflecting on that a lot while reading Nicole's chapter, because it wasn't something that I was expecting to kind of add into my labels. But if I reinvent myself more in 2026, maybe I will shift around some of my titles and throw translator in there. Who knows? We'll see. Talking about Nicole's workshop, I was immediately struck with how bubbly she was. Like, her energy was like super infectious. Her workshop, which was Signs from Spirit, was talking about asking for signs, which, if you've been listening to this podcast, we did a whole episode on this in season 1. What I found really refreshing about this, because again, this in a lot of ways was a repeat for me because this is something that I'm very, very familiar with. I have this relationship with signs where I receive angel numbers. I will receive signs. I'm somebody where if something pops up, I will recognize it. I'll know intuitively, oh, wow, that was a sign. So I am not unable to see them, but I often don't ask for them. And every once in a while, I'll be talking to somebody and they'll bring up signs, and I go, oh, yeah, maybe that's my reminder. Maybe I should be asking for signs. And I kind of feel like there's like this expectation that I should be doing that. And what I really appreciated about her chapter is that she was kind of letting us off the hook. We don't need to have that standard and expectation that we must ask for signs and we must do them in this way or on these terms. And if you think of it and you want to, great. Otherwise, it's just about being open to that channel. For people who are interested in receiving, I tend to suggest asking for a sign because you're early on and you're trying to open up that channel. So by you reaching out, it helps them with also reaching. It shortens the distance, if you will. But there's so many other ways that you can connect. You can set an intention before you go to sleep. Hey, please come visit me in my dreams. Or you're doing a meditation practice. Hey, please send me some information. Hey, I'm going to be doing a journaling practice, yada, yada. There's a lot of different ways that we can reach out. In addition to validating when it does come in, that helps to reinforce that channel. That made me feel a little bit better and less self-judgy about not asking for signs other than like once or twice a year when I think of it. I wrote this quote down that resonated from the workshop where she was talking about our past loved ones. And she said, quote, "They're not gone. They're just different." It's acknowledging that we're always transforming and changing. Again, I have mediumship abilities, but it's not a label that I have attached to myself just yet. When people are moving on, Hallie had mentioned this in season 1 in our mediumship episode, that there's often common messages. There's a perspective shift because they're not who they were in the human experience, going back to Kerry's chapter. Some of those detachments and things that we get into our head about that we think are important just aren't important anymore because we have this different perspective. When you have a completely different worldview and perspective, you are different in some ways. Some of your essence, maybe your personality is similar, but you are going to be not 100% a carbon copy, and you shouldn't be. And I think that us remembering that hopefully also allows people to remember that as we are alive and we are walking around and we're interacting with people, this notion that people can't change, I don't think that's supportive or helpful at all. We can have most of our core essence be the same, but there's so much that we can shift, adjust, recalibrate, learn, unlearn, relearn to develop into more evolved, more connected, more compassionate, more grounded people. And the last thing that I wrote down was the nice reminder, because I have definitely forgotten to do this. I'm in a habit of just on autopilot. When I see angel numbers, I just go write them down on my phone and I track them. And then at the end of the month, I sit there and I tally what did I have the most of. And what I used to do in journaling is I would look up the meaning of maybe the most common numbers that I saw, or I would channel something for them. And I did stop doing that in 2025 entirely. I just wrote them down. But also something that you could do, which I have stopped doing, when you see the angel number in real time, it's on a license plate, it's on a clock. That's most common for me. It's on a receipt. It's in a timestamp when I'm video editing or listening to a podcast or whatever it is. To pause and say, what was I just thinking about? What was I just doing? Why am I getting this reminder, this nudge? That mindfulness piece that I know I definitely forget to do because I'm just like, oh, I saw it. I'm paying attention to it. Let me go write it down. Clocked that. We're receiving the letter and then we're not opening it. So here's my reminder to you and to myself to actually start doing that a little bit more. If you're curious about signs and synchronicities, again, we had a episode in season 1 where we talked about angel numbers, signs, synchronicities, how to ask for them, all that fun stuff. All right, last chapter. So the 4th chapter that is in this book and that I read in my first sitting was Embodiment, Trust, and Self-Empowerment. This is Holly's chapter. Shout out Holly, local girl. At some point, hopefully we can connect and we can meet up in person. It would be so fun to actually physically meet one of the co-authors, but I know she's Massachusetts based, or at least as of the last time that we spoke. I was so pleased to see that there was someone else that put jokes in their chapter because I was very intentional. As you know, Virgos got to have a sense of humor. I was like, I don't want my chapter to be dry and boring, so I got to put some funnies in there. So one of the rounds when I went back to edit, I was like, how can I write this more playfully or how I'm talking? I appreciated in Holly's chapter how there was some jokes in there. Plus there's references. Like she was talking about Mulan and I was like, yes, I love this. Let's talk more about Disney movies that we watched growing up. Separately, as far as the actual content, so funnies aside, there were themes of reclamation, reconnecting into your body. We talked about that a little bit with Kerry's chapter. Very, very end, tail end of Q3, beginning of Q4, I started getting these channeled instructions from my guides to do these different wellness plans. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am in some ways a very structured person, but then also have trouble maintaining certain structures. It's a whole dichotomy issue. But this started coming in like each night, fill these boxes in and do this and populate it once a week and do this for 4 weeks. And then 4 weeks would be up. And then I would sit down to channel and I would get a new one. New components, new format, new structure. Okay, now fill this out every night. Do this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks go. Okay, now here's a different one. Do this one for 5. So this has been happening over and over and over again for months. As of the time of recording this, in a few days, I'm going to be hitting the start of a new week and I'm going to be channeling a new one. It has been so effective for me to, one, be switching to I only plan anything that I'm channeling with my intuition. Trying to get out of my brain and saying, I have to do this, I have to do that. Hello, guides. What is on the agenda for today? For tomorrow? Practically, what should I be moving around? And just doing that a lot more has, one, taken pressure off, and two, been amusing because you realize they know what they're talking about, because it ends up just like working out better. Like the amount of times I've had a channeled session where it's like, okay, work on this one thing for 1 hour on this one day and time. I end up being able to crush whatever that task is, which I haven't been able to get done for months, and I get it done even in less than the time that I've allocated. That's happened multiple times. I'm like, oh, this is great. It's like I have the energy there, the flow is there, and I'm allocating just the right amount of time where I either hit it almost exactly or end up going under, which of course is very exciting as someone who wants to check off their to-dos. How does this relate back to Holly's chapter? This is a whole tangent, but this is what I wrote down for her section. Why are you talking about this for whatever Holly's awakening was? Hers was like going to Egypt and it was like really cool. So the notes that I wrote down like don't seem at all relevant on paper to her actual story, but again, these are the things that were flying into my brain as I was going through her story and her journey. It was a repeating motif, at least in these first few chapters, of who are you? How are you identifying? How can you connect back to yourself, your physical body, your heart space? Health, wellness, creating balance in your life, detoxing from overstimulation, the human experience. That came up in one version or another across all of these chapters and all of these workshops. As somebody who has gone through those experiences, is going through other iterations of those experiences, those are probably at the top of the list and super, super relevant. For the workshop that she did, this was the embodiment practice and connecting with plant allies. She was drumming and singing. Normally, when I watch content or listen to content, I speed it up. So when I got to this music part, I was like, I probably shouldn't listen to this on times 2, and I should lower it to times 1 because that might mess with the energy. Initially, it was like, I was like, I don't think this is what she intended. So I slowed it down, listened on times 1 speed. Somatic practices, which is what she was talking about. So again, connecting to your body and how valuable that's been for her. I'm trying to connect to my body more, and that each night before bed, I've been doing this for like a month now, that I do just like little lymphatic circuit. You tap in certain spots and I go through that full cycle. You jump up and down and wiggle around a few times, and I just do that right before bed. But otherwise, there's intentional breath work, which sometimes I'll remember, but I don't have a full routine for that. Doing certain stretches. I'm not fully back into a yoga practice, which I want to do. Nobody's perfect. We're all trying. But sound healing, as somebody who's very musical, I grew up singing and did that all the way through college, a little bit into the workforce, cut with COVID. Faucet turned off for that. When she was doing so she did the drums, then she did like a shaker, some sort of, I don't know, some like beads or something. Crystal bowls was the last piece. I instantly felt a third eye activation for the crystal bowls. Like I felt like really, really lit up. And honestly, through the process of reading these chapters and watching these workshops, by the end of those allotted periods of time of reading the 4 chapters or watching the 4 workshops, I think I did each of them in an hour block, like 2 separate hour blocks. I felt like really inspired, like really lit up and definitely activated. I obviously was writing and taking notes, but I had memories coming in. The idea to even record this mini series came through while I was writing. I was channeling inadvertently, and I just had things that were dropping in or ideas of like, oh, this is what I could create, or this is what I could do. And yeah, so I am curious for people, because I know it's something that we haven't talked about on this podcast, something that we've kicked around of, oh, well, you could have music or sound healing or somatic healing, something that we haven't discussed. So if you would be interested in us doing that as a topic in the future, please comment and let us know. Same thing for Holly, as I mentioned for Kerry. Very, very grounded energy. Oh my gosh, when I was watching this video, I was like, okay, I'm relaxed. This is serene, very poised, very approachable. So it's really nice being able to watch the workshops. Obviously, not everybody did them, but it has been a treat for me because I'm reading. So I have my own voice in my head about their storytelling, and then being able to see them in action and hearing them talk adds this whole other layer in contextualizing their chapters. That being said, hopefully these conversations, which I will do an undetermined number in the future because I don't know how these are going to get subdivided, but I'm going to be doing more of these. And hopefully, similarly to what I was able to experience while going through these first few chapters, hopefully you have some food for thought, some questions answered or raised, things to reflect on, and it being nice to put a face in visuals and flailing arms to the voice that you've been listening to for the last few years. Thank you for watching or listening, and I hope that you enjoyed the first installment of this Soul Rising book club. If you would like to follow along, you can either just read this book straight through, or you can read the chapters just after I'm reading them. Because again, I'm not like spoiling that much. I'm not giving you a plot summary of each of the chapters. I'm just explaining some of the things that I thought of. So you can still enjoy them essentially unspoiled. Yeah, I hope that you enjoy the series. Please do give some feedback, ask questions. So you can leave comments, you can send me messages on social media. As always, details in the show notes. You can also send an email. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. Of course, when we get to my chapter, would love to hear. There's a bias there, obviously, but anything that sticks out to you with the other stories, because I've really been enjoying reading this. I know I'm only 4 chapters in out of 33, but I've been enjoying it. And I'm doing something that I do not normally do with a book. Normally, I'm like, okay, I have my book. Let me read it. I have my Fable goal. Okay, let's see if I can finish this book before the end of the month so that I can count towards my tracker. I'm not doing that with this book because it's very intentionally spread out. And I'm just going to be reading when my guides are like, hey, block some time to read the book. And I'll just read a little bit of it and then really sit with and marinate in what came up for me. And I think that that's really nice. So if you have read any books in a similar way or you want to mirror that experience by reading this book, feel free. We can go on this very different reading journey together. All right. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time. There's nothing worse than having tea and then you don't drink it right away. And then when you go to have it, all of a sudden it's cold. It's such a bummer because it's like, it's warm, but it's not hot. So it doesn't like feel nice going down. Oh, I'm going to just chug some of it now then so it doesn't get any worse.